your partner won't complete you, and other expectations you need to drop. Written and narrated by MSC Boost. You already know what your partner is supposed to do when you've had a terrible day at work. They're supposed to notice immediately, without being told. They should ask the right questions, say the right things, maybe pour you a drink or suggest ordering takeout. When they don't do this, when they seem oblivious to your mood or, worse, start talking about their own day, something feels wrong. Not just disappointing, but fundamentally incorrect, like they've failed some basic test of partnership. Here's what nobody tells you. That script you're running isn't yours. You didn't sit down and consciously decide what a good partner does when you're stressed. You absorbed it from somewhere else entirely. And that somewhere else probably has nothing to do with the actual person standing in front of another you, or the relationship you're actually living. Chapter 1. Where your relationship expectations actually come from. Most people spend their entire relationship feeling vaguely disappointed or frustrated, never realizing they're measuring their partner against a standard they didn't even know they'd adopted. The expectations feel so natural, so obviously correct, that questioning them seems absurd. But those expectations came from specific places, and most of those places were terrible teachers. Your brain has been collecting relationship data since before you could talk. Every interaction you witnessed between your parents or caregivers, every movie you watched, every song you heard, every conversation you overheard about what men do or what women need or what love looks like, all of it went into a massive, mostly unconscious database about how relationships work. By the time you entered your first serious relationship, you were already operating with thousands of unexamined beliefs about what partners should be, do, and provide. The problem isn't that you have expectations. Expectations are necessary. They're how we coordinate with other humans and build functional partnerships. The problem is that most of your expectations weren't chosen, they were inherited. And what you inherited was a chaotic mix of outdated cultural scripts, fantasy narratives designed to sell movie tickets, and the specific quirks of whatever relationship models you happened to witness growing up. Your parents' marriage taught you something about partnership, whether that marriage was functional or dysfunctional, present or absent. Maybe you watched your mother handle everything while your father remained emotionally distant, and you absorbed the belief that women manage the emotional labor while men provide stability. Maybe you watched your parents fight constantly and made a silent vow that your relationship would be different, which means you now expect conflict-free harmony and interpret any disagreement as a sign of failure. Maybe your parents seemed perfectly happy, and you're confused about why your own relationship feels harder, unaware that you only saw the public performance and not the private negotiations that made it work. Whatever you witnessed became your baseline. This is what relationships look like. This is what wives do. This is how husbands behave. This is how often couples have sex. This is how they handle money. This is what they talk about. This is how they show love. You didn't choose these beliefs, they chose you simply by being present during your developmental years. Then the media stepped in and made everything worse. Romantic comedies taught you that the right person makes everything easy, that true love means never having to communicate directly, that grand gestures matter more than daily reliability. You watched characters meet, fall madly in love, overcome a single dramatic obstacle, and live happily ever after in 90 minutes. You never saw them negotiate whose turn it is to clean the bathroom or have the same circular argument about how much time they spend with their respective friends. You never watched them lie in bed on a Wednesday night, both scrolling their phones in silence, feeling vaguely disconnected and wondering if something is wrong. The songs you listened to told you that love is an overwhelming, all-consuming force. Your partner should be your everything, your best friend, your lover, your therapist, your adventure companion, your intellectual equal, your spiritual guide. Anything less than complete fulfillment means you haven't found the one. Nobody mentioned that expecting another human being to meet all your needs in all categories is a recipe for disappointment at best and resentment at worst. Social media added a particularly toxic layer to this already unstable foundation. You now have access to thousands of carefully curated relationship performances, each one designed to showcase the absolute best moments while hiding everything that came before or after. Someone posts a photo of surprise flowers, and your brain registers it as evidence of what partners do, conveniently ignoring that you have no idea how often this happens or what else is going on in that relationship. Someone shares a story about how their partner just knew what they needed, and suddenly your own partner's failure to read your mind feels like a deficiency rather than normal human limitation. The comparison isn't even conscious. You're not actively thinking, "My partner should be more like that person's partner." But the images accumulate. The stories pile up. And somewhere in your brain, they establish a baseline for what relationships should look like, how often partners should surprise each other, how much effort they should put into date nights, how naturally everything should flow. Your first serious relationship also shaped your expectations in ways you probably haven't examined. Maybe your first partner was extremely attentive, always texting back immediately, always wanting to spend time together. You experienced that as love. And now when partners need more space or take longer to respond, something registers as off. Or maybe your first relationship was tumultuous, full of drama and passion and reconciliation. And now steady relationships feel boring because your nervous system associates intensity with intimacy. Even the cultural messages you absorbed about your specific identity, your gender, your sexuality, your ethnicity, your class background deposited expectations you didn't request. Men should be strong and stoic. Women should be nurturing and accommodating. Couples should merge their lives completely. Partners should maintain independence. Success means owning a home together. Real love means total acceptance without change. The contradictions don't matter because these beliefs don't operate in the conscious, rational part of your brain where contradictions can be identified and resolved. All of this happens beneath your awareness. You don't wake up and think, "Today I will expect my partner to behave like a romantic comedy character, while also fulfilling the role my same-gender parent played in my childhood household." You just feel disappointed when they do something that violates an expectation you didn't know you had. You feel frustrated when they don't follow rules you never articulated because you didn't realize you were enforcing rules. The most insidious part is how natural these expectations feel. They don't feel like learned behaviors or absorbed messages, they feel like truth. When your partner fails to meet an expectation, your brain doesn't think, "This is an interesting difference between my unconscious script and their behavior." It thinks, "Something is wrong with them," or "Something is wrong with our relationship." The expectation itself remains invisible, while the violation of it feels glaringly obvious. This invisibility is why simply communicating better doesn't solve most relationship problems. You can't communicate about expectations you don't know you have. You can tell your partner you need more quality time together. But if you haven't examined where your definition of quality time comes from, you might be asking for something that matches a script from your childhood or a scene from a movie, rather than something that actually works for two real people with different needs and preferences. The distinction between inherited expectations and chosen values matters enormously. Chosen values are beliefs you've actually examined and decided align with what you want your life and relationships to look like. Inherited expectations are beliefs that got deposited in your brain through repeated exposure, and you're now executing them automatically without ever checking whether they serve you. A chosen value might be, "I want a partner who is willing to have difficult conversations rather than avoiding conflict." An inherited expectation might be, "My partner should always know when something is bothering me without me having to say anything." Both feel true to the person holding them, but only the first has been consciously examined and endorsed. Awareness of where your expectations come from doesn't automatically change them. Your brain doesn't work that way. Knowing intellectually that you absorbed an unrealistic expectation from romantic comedies doesn't stop you from feeling disappointed when your relationship doesn't match the script. The neural pathways are already formed. The associations already exist. The expectation still fires automatically when the relevant situation occurs. But awareness creates options. When you can catch yourself thinking, "My partner should know what I need without me asking," and you can trace that belief back to its source, maybe a song lyric you heard 1,000 times, maybe watching your parents' unspoken communication, maybe a scene from a movie where the right person just knew, you create a small gap between the expectation and your response to it. That gap is where change becomes possible. The work isn't about eliminating expectations entirely. You will always have expectations about relationships because expectations are how humans coordinate behavior and build partnerships. The work is about making your expectations visible so you can decide whether to keep them. Some of what you inherited might actually serve you well. Some of it might be actively destroying your relationship. You won't know which is which until you can see what you're working with. This means getting granular about the specific expectations you're carrying around. Not just, "I expect my partner to love me," but "I expect my partner to text me back within 30 minutes, unless they're in a meeting. And when I'm upset, I expect them to stop what they're doing and ask me what's wrong until I tell them. And I expect us to have sex twice a week. And I expect them to remember the names of all my friends and the details of my work problems. And I expect them to want to spend weekends the same way I do." Most people have never itemized their expectations this way because it feels absurd to spell out beliefs that seem obvious. But obvious to whom? Your partner arrived with their own set of inherited expectations that feel equally natural to them, but probably conflict with yours in dozens of ways you haven't identified yet. You both keep violating each other's invisible rules and feeling hurt or frustrated or resentful, never realizing you're playing two different games with two different rulebooks. The framework for recognizing when you're operating from programming versus preference is simpler than it sounds. Programming feels mandatory, non-negotiable, just how things are. Preference feels like what you choose, but recognize as not universal. When you think, "Partners should split household chores exactly 50-50, that's probably programming. When you think, "I prefer a relationship where we negotiate household responsibilities based on what we each hate least," that's preference. Programming shows up as moral language. Your partner should do this. It's wrong when they don't do that. Good partners always behave this way. Bad partners do this other thing. The moment you hear yourself thinking in terms of should, always, never, right, or wrong, you've likely bumped into programming. Preferences use different language. "I'd like," "I prefer," "I've found this works better for me," "This is important to me because." Preferences acknowledge that multiple valid approaches exist. Programming believes there's only correct way. Programming also tends to be invisible until violated. You don't walk around thinking, "I expect my partner to kiss me goodbye when leaving for work." You just feel weird when they don't do it. You don't consciously expect them to text you updates throughout the day until they stop doing it and you feel disconnected. Programming runs in the background until something disrupts it, at which point it suddenly becomes urgent and feels like a crisis. Preferences, by contrast, are things you're aware of wanting before they become problems. You know you like having dinner together most nights because it helps you stay connected. You know you need some time alone to recharge after social events. You know you prefer talking through decisions rather than one person making unilateral choices. These aren't unconscious requirements, they're conscious preferences you can discuss and negotiate. The reason this distinction matters is that you can't change what you can't see. Programming that remains invisible will continue running your relationship decisions without your input. You'll keep feeling disappointed or frustrated without knowing why. You'll keep attributing the problem to your partner or your relationship when the actual problem is that you're measuring reality against a script you didn't write and never agreed to follow. Making your expectations visible doesn't mean all of them will turn out to be wrong or unreasonable. Some of what you inherited might actually reflect your genuine values and needs. But you won't know which expectations to keep and which to discard until you can see them clearly enough to evaluate them. The expectations you inherited by accident might work perfectly well. or they might be slowly poisoning every interaction you have with your partner. The difficulty is that most people resist this examination because it feels like giving up on having standards. If you start questioning your expectations, does that mean you have to accept whatever your partner does, even when it bothers you? If you acknowledge that your beliefs about relationships came from movies and your parents, rather than from some universal truth, does that mean you can't want anything from your partner? This completely misunderstands what's happening. Examining your expectations isn't about lowering your standards. It's about figuring out which standards are actually yours. When you identify an expectation as inherited programming that doesn't serve you, dropping it doesn't mean settling for less. It means creating space for something better, something that might actually work for the specific relationship you're in rather than the generic relationship template you absorbed. You can want things from your partner. You should want things from your partner. Wanting nothing would make you a terrible partner, not a good one. The question is whether what you want is based on reality and conscious choice, or based on unexamined scripts that may have nothing to do with the actual humans involved in your actual relationship. This chapter exists because most relationship advice skips this step. It jumps straight to communication techniques and conflict resolution strategies and love languages without addressing the fact that you might be communicating about problems that don't actually exist outside your inherited expectations. You might be trying to resolve conflicts that are really just clashes between two sets of unconscious programming. You might be speaking different love languages when the real issue is that you absorbed completely different beliefs about what love is supposed to look like. Figuring out where your expectations came from doesn't fix your relationship by itself, but it creates the foundation for everything else. You can't build realistic expectations on top of a pile of unexamined assumptions. You can't negotiate functional agreements when half your requirements are invisible to both you and your partner. You can't tell the difference between genuine incompatibility and script incompatibility until you know what scripts you're running. The rest of this book walks through the specific expectations that cause the most damage and provides alternatives that actually work. But all of that depends on being able to see your expectations as expectations rather than as truth. Your relationship isn't failing because your partner won't complete you or read your mind or behave like characters in a story. Your relationship is struggling because you're both trying to meet standards neither of you chose, judging each other against templates that have nothing to do with who you actually are, and wondering why nothing feels right when you're doing everything correctly. What comes next requires looking directly at the expectations you've been carrying without questioning. Some of them will turn out to be reasonable and worth keeping. Many of them will turn out to be fantasies that make real partnership impossible. The difference between the two determines whether your relationship has a chance at becoming what you actually want rather than what you inherited. Chapter 2. The completion myth: what you're responsible for versus what your partner provides. Your partner cannot fix your self-worth, and expecting them to try is destroying both of you. Every time you look to them for validation, you should be generating internally. Every time you need them to make you feel whole or purposeful or okay with yourself, you're handing them a job they cannot possibly do, and then resenting them when they fail. The belief that another person completes you sounds romantic until you actually try to live it. Then it becomes a suffocating weight on both sides of the relationship. The person being asked to complete someone else gets exhausted trying to be everything: cheerleader, therapist, purpose giver, self-esteem builder, constant validator. The person seeking completion never finds it because no external source can fill an internal void, so they keep demanding more while feeling perpetually unsatisfied. Most people never examine what they're actually asking their partner to provide versus what they need to provide for themselves. The categories blur together into a general expectation that a good relationship should make you feel better about yourself and your life. When it doesn't, when you still feel insecure or directionless or unhappy despite being with someone who loves you, the conclusion seems obvious. Wrong person, wrong relationship. But the problem isn't usually the person or the relationship. The problem is that you're outsourcing responsibilities that cannot be outsourced. Self-worth, life purpose, emotional regulation, and personal fulfillment are your jobs. Your partner can support you in these areas, but they cannot generate them for you. Asking them to creates a dynamic where you're perpetually dependent, and they're perpetually inadequate. Self-worth is the most commonly outsourced responsibility, and the most destructive when handed to someone else. People enter relationships hoping their partner's love will finally make them feel valuable, desirable, enough. The logic seems sound. If this person loves me, I must be lovable. If they choose me, I must be worthy of being chosen. If they find me attractive, I must be attractive. This works temporarily. New relationships often produce a surge of self-worth because someone is actively choosing you, wanting you, validating your existence. But this borrowed self-worth is unstable by design. It depends entirely on your partner's continued affection and approval. When they're distracted, stressed, or just going through their normal human fluctuations of emotional availability, your self-worth crashes. When they criticize you or seem less interested in sex or spend time on their own interests instead of focusing on you, you interpret it as evidence of your inadequacy rather than evidence that they're a separate human with their own internal states. The dependency intensifies over time. You start monitoring their mood and behavior for signs of their approval or disapproval. You need regular reassurance that they still find you attractive, still think you're interesting, still want to be with you. When reassurance comes, you feel temporarily stable. When it doesn't, you feel worthless. Your partner becomes responsible for regulating something they have no power to regulate: your fundamental sense of being okay. People who outsource their self-worth also outsource their emotional state, expecting their partner to manage their feelings for them. When you feel anxious, your partner should calm you down. When you feel sad, they should cheer you up. When you feel insecure, they should reassure you. When you feel bored, they should entertain you. The underlying belief is that your emotional experience is your partner's responsibility, and if they truly loved you, they would do whatever it takes to keep you feeling good. This expectation shows up in conversations where you're upset and your partner tries to problem solve or offer perspective. But you get more upset because they're not just listening or validating your feelings. What you really want is for them to absorb your distress and hand you back comfort. You want them to take your difficult emotion and transform it into a better emotion. And when they can't or won't do this, it feels like rejection. Emotional regulation is a skill you develop through practice, not something another person can do on your behalf. Your partner can offer support, empathy, and presence while you regulate yourself, but they cannot reach into your nervous system and calm it down for you. They cannot think the thoughts that will shift your perspective or feel the feelings that will process your experience. Those are things you do, and when you try to outsource them, you stay stuck in a perpetual state of emotional dependency. Life purpose is another area people routinely hand over to relationships, expecting their partner to give their life meaning or direction. Maybe you're unfulfilled in your career, unsure what you're working toward, feeling like your days are meaningless. Then you meet someone, and the relationship itself becomes your purpose. You're building something together. You have someone to come home to. Your life finally matters because you matter to them. The relationship fills the void temporarily, but the void was never meant to be filled by another person. Human beings need purpose that comes from their own choices, actions, and values, not from being needed by someone else. When your purpose is entirely wrapped up in your relationship, you lose track of what you actually want from your own life. Your goals become relationship goals. Your interests become shared interests. Your sense of direction becomes wherever the relationship goes. This creates a terrible trap. If the relationship is your purpose and the relationship struggles, your entire life feels purposeless. If your partner wants more independence or pursues their own interests, you experience it as abandonment because they're supposed to be your reason for existing. You also become increasingly resentful because no matter how much your partner loves you, their love cannot substitute for having your own meaningful engagement with your life. People who outsource purpose often end up building their entire identity around being someone's partner. They define themselves through the relationship, what they do for their partner, how they support their partner, what kind of partner they are. When asked about their interests or goals, they talk about the relationship or their partner's interests and goals. This isn't devotion or healthy prioritization. It's self-abandonment disguised as love. Personal fulfillment falls into the same trap. Many people believe their partner should make them happy, make their life exciting, make every day feel worthwhile. When life feels boring or disappointing or lacking something, they expect their partner to fix it. The partner should plan more adventures, initiate more interesting conversations, bring more energy to the relationship, somehow inject vitality into their life. But personal fulfillment requires active engagement with your own life. It requires pursuing interests that matter to you, creating experiences that align with your values, building skills that challenge you, contributing to things beyond yourself. Your partner can share these experiences with you, but they cannot create fulfillment on your behalf. Expecting them to results in constant pressure on them to be more entertaining, more energetic, more exciting, while you remain passive and dissatisfied. The distinction between interdependence and unhealthy dependence lies in who's responsible for generating what. Interdependence means you each maintain your own self-worth, regulate your own emotions, pursue your own purpose, and create your own fulfillment, and then you share these capacities with each other. You bring your whole self to the relationship, rather than expecting the relationship to make you whole. Healthy interdependence means your partner's support genuinely helps you, but their absence doesn't destroy you. When they compliment you, it feels good, but you don't need constant compliments to feel adequate. When they comfort you, it helps, but you can also comfort yourself. When they're excited about something in their life, you're happy for them, rather than threatened that they don't need you to feel fulfilled. Unhealthy dependence means you collapse without your partner's input. Their opinion of you determines your opinion of yourself. Their mood determines your mood. Their attention determines your sense of being valued. Their presence determines whether your life feels meaningful. You've essentially hired them to be your emotional support system, self-esteem generator, purpose provider, and happiness creator, jobs they never applied for and cannot successfully perform. Most people don't realize they're doing this because the dependency feels like love. Needing your partner feels like proof you care about them. Being devastated when they're upset with you feels like evidence of how much they matter. Organizing your life around them feels like commitment. But need and love are different things. Genuine love is when you want someone in your life because they add to your wholeness, not because they create it. The practical work of separating your responsibilities from your partner's requires getting specific about what you're currently outsourcing. Self-worth outsourcing shows up when you need your partner to tell you you're attractive, smart, interesting, valuable, or good at things. It shows up when their criticism sends you spiraling. It shows up when you constantly check how they're feeling about you. It shows up when you change yourself based on what you think will maintain their approval. Meeting your own self-worth needs means building evidence for yourself that you're adequate regardless of anyone else's opinion. This doesn't mean never caring what your partner thinks. It means your baseline sense of okayness doesn't depend on their approval. You know you're worthy because you treat yourself like someone worthy. You make choices that align with your values. You handle your responsibilities. You treat others with respect. You develop competencies that matter to you. The evidence of your worth comes from your own actions, not from your partner's validation. Emotional regulation outsourcing shows up when you expect your partner to fix your feelings. It shows up when you're upset and need them to drop everything to comfort you. It shows up when their failure to react the way you want makes you more upset. It shows up when you blame them for your emotional state. You made me feel, instead of I feel. Meeting your own emotional regulation needs means developing the capacity to sit with difficult feelings without needing someone else to rescue you from them. You learn to notice your emotions without being controlled by them. You practice self-soothing techniques that actually work for your nervous system, Maybe that's deep breathing. Maybe it's movement. Maybe it's engaging your hands with a physical task. You get better at identifying what you actually need when you're upset instead of just needing your partner to make it stop. This doesn't mean never going to your partner for comfort. It means being able to regulate yourself enough to communicate what you need instead of melting down and expecting them to figure it out. It means not punishing them when they can't fix your feelings. It means taking responsibility for your emotional state even when they contributed to it. Purpose outsourcing shows up when the relationship is your main source of meaning. It shows up when you can't describe what you want from your life separately from what you want from your relationship. It shows up when your partner pursuing their own interests feels like abandonment. It shows up when you organize your entire life around being available to them. Meeting your own purpose needs means identifying what matters to you independent of your relationship status. What would you want to work toward if you were single? What contributions do you want to make? What skills do you want to develop? What experiences do you want to have? Your relationship can align with your purpose, support your purpose, or share aspects of your purpose. But it cannot be your entire purpose without making you desperately dependent on its continuation. Fulfillment outsourcing shows up when you expect your partner to make your life interesting or exciting. It shows up when you're bored and blame them. It shows up when you wait for them to plan things, initiate adventures, or create experiences instead of doing this yourself. It shows up when their normal, human ordinariness disappoints you because you expected them to make everything better. Meeting your own fulfillment needs means actively engaging with your life instead of passively waiting for your partner to make it worthwhile. You pursue hobbies and interests that engage you. You build friendships outside the relationship. You create experiences that matter to you. You challenge yourself with new skills or learning. Your partner can share these things with you, and that's wonderful when it happens. But you don't depend on them to generate your entire sense of life being worth living. The inventory process for distinguishing what's yours versus what's your partner's responsibility can be done by examining specific situations where you feel disappointed or resentful. When you're upset that your partner didn't react the way you wanted, what were you actually expecting them to provide? When you feel neglected because they're focused on their own interests, what need are you expecting them to meet? When you need constant reassurance, what are you trying to get from them that you're not giving yourself? Each time you identify an expectation, ask whether this is something a partner can reasonably provide or something you need to provide for yourself. Partners can reasonably provide affection, support, companionship, cooperation in shared responsibilities, emotional presence, physical intimacy, honest communication about their experience. Partners cannot reasonably provide your self-worth, your emotional stability, your life purpose, your personal fulfillment, your sense of identity, your reason for existing. The categories overlap because partners do influence how you feel about yourself and your life. The difference is between influence and responsibility. Your partner's love can influence your self-worth in positive ways without being responsible for creating your self-worth. Your partner's presence can contribute to your fulfillment without being responsible for making your life fulfilling. The relationship can support your sense of purpose without being your entire purpose. When you take back responsibility for the things that are yours, the relationship paradoxically gets better. Your partner stops feeling like they're failing impossible tests. They can love you without the pressure of needing to complete you. They can be themselves without worrying that their normal human limitations will destroy your emotional state. You stop needing them to be something they're not and can appreciate what they actually are. You also become a better partner because you're bringing something to the relationship instead of just extracting from it. You have your own emotional resources to share instead of constantly depleting theirs. You have your own sense of purpose and fulfillment that you can bring to shared experiences. You have self-worth that doesn't require constant maintenance from them. You become someone who adds to their life rather than someone whose stability depends entirely on their performance. The practice of meeting your own needs while still benefiting from partnership requires daily attention to who's doing what. When you feel bad about yourself, Your automatic response might be to seek reassurance from your partner. The practice is to pause and generate your own evidence of adequacy before you go to them. Build the internal resource first, then share your experience with them if you want connection around it. This completely changes the interaction from "fix me" to "I'm handling this and I'd like to share it with you." When you're emotionally dysregulated, the automatic response might be to need your partner to calm you down. The practice is to employ your own regulation tools before involving them. Get yourself to a place where you can communicate clearly about what you're experiencing and what kind of support would help, rather than expecting them to manage your emotional state for you. This changes the dynamic from "rescue me" to "I'm working with this and your presence would help." When you feel directionless or unfulfilled, the automatic response might be to make the relationship your focus and expect it to provide meaning. The practice is to identify what you actually want to pursue or experience, and then do it, either independently or with your partner if they're interested. This changes the dynamic from "be my reason for living" to "I'm building a life I find meaningful and I want you in it." Your partner still matters enormously in this framework. They're not reduced to being incidental to your life or irrelevant to your well-being. Their love still feels good. Their support still helps. Their presence still adds to your experience. But they're not responsible for generating your fundamental okayness, and that difference transforms everything. People resist taking back these responsibilities because it feels like giving up on having needs or lowering standards for partnership. If you're supposed to handle your own self-worth, does that mean your partner can treat you however they want? If you're supposed to regulate your own emotions, does that mean your partner shouldn't comfort you? If you're supposed to have your own purpose, does that mean your partner is irrelevant to your life? None of this is what separating responsibilities means. Your partner should treat you well, and you can have standards about how you're treated without making them responsible for your self-worth. Your partner can and should offer comfort and support, and you can receive that support without making them responsible for regulating your emotions. Your partner is incredibly relevant to your life, and you can share a meaningful life together without making them responsible for giving your life meaning. The boundary is about generation versus contribution. You generate your own self-worth, emotional stability, purpose, and fulfillment. Your partner contributes to these things through their love, support, and presence, but they don't create them from scratch. You're not asking them to fill a void, you're inviting them to add to something that already exists. Making this shift doesn't happen overnight because the patterns of dependency are deeply ingrained. You've probably been outsourcing these responsibilities for years, maybe your entire adult life. Every time you automatically look to your partner to make you feel better about yourself or manage your emotions or give your life meaning, you're running an old program that needs to be rewritten. The rewriting happens through repetition of the new pattern. Every time you catch yourself seeking external validation and instead generate internal evidence of your adequacy, you strengthen the new pathway. Every time you notice emotional dysregulation and employ your own regulation tools before involving your partner, you build the new skill. Every time you identify something you want to pursue and pursue it regardless of your partner's involvement, you reclaim your agency. Your partner will also need to adjust to the change. If they're accustomed to being responsible for your emotional state or self-worth, they might not know how to relate to you when you stop requiring these things from them. They might feel less needed, which can be uncomfortable, even though being less needed is actually healthy. They might not trust that you're actually handling your own needs and keep trying to rescue you from feelings you're perfectly capable of managing. Communication about what you're working on helps. Let them know you're practicing taking responsibility for your own self-worth or emotional regulation or purpose, not because they've failed, but because it's your job. Let them know you still want their support and presence, but the nature of what you need from them is shifting. This helps them understand that your behavior change isn't rejection, it's you becoming a healthier partner. The relationship that emerges from both people taking responsibility for their own well-being looks completely different from the relationship built on mutual dependency. Instead of two people clinging to each other to fill their voids, you have two whole people choosing to share their lives. Instead of constant pressure to be everything for each other, you have space to be yourselves while still being deeply connected. Instead of resentment over unmet needs that cannot be met, you have appreciation for what each person actually brings. This doesn't make the relationship less important or less meaningful. It makes it more sustainable. Dependency masquerading as love eventually collapses under its own weight, because no person can successfully complete another person. Genuine partnership between two people who are each responsible for their own wholeness can last because neither person is asking the impossible. What you're responsible for: your self-worth, your emotional regulation, your life purpose, your personal fulfillment. These are not burdens to carry alone. They're the foundation you build that allows you to actually participate in a relationship instead of just extracting from it. What your partner provides: love, support, companionship, presence. These become gifts you receive and give rather than requirements for survival. The difference between the two determines whether your relationship is a source of mutual growth or mutual depletion. Chapter 3. Rewriting the unspoken rules you're enforcing. You have an entire rulebook about how your relationship should function, and your partner has never seen it. They're violating rules they don't know exist, and you're punishing them for it. Every time they do something that feels wrong to you, not morally wrong, just relationally wrong, they've broken a rule from your invisible manual. Every time you feel hurt or annoyed by something that seems like basic relationship competence to you, you're enforcing a standard they never agreed to follow. Your partner also has their own rulebook, equally invisible to you. Right now, you're probably breaking their rules too, and neither of you realizes you're playing by completely different guidelines. You both think your rules are just how relationships work, like gravity or grammar. But your rules aren't universal laws, they're specific beliefs you absorbed about what partners do, how often they do it, and what it means when they don't. The rules feel so natural that questioning them seems absurd. Partners should check in throughout the day. Partners should always kiss goodbye. Partners should resolve conflicts before going to bed. Partners should spend weekends together. Partners should know each other's schedules. Partners should initiate sex equally. Partners should remember important details without being reminded. Each rule carries the weight of obvious truth, and when your partner violates it, something registers as fundamentally wrong with them or the relationship. But where did these rules come from? You didn't sit down when you started dating and negotiate how often you'd text or how you'd handle disagreements or how much physical affection you'd exchange daily. You just expected these things would happen naturally because that's what partners do. Except your partner expected different things would happen naturally because their rulebook says something else entirely. Most relationship conflicts aren't really about the surface issue. They're about incompatible rules that have never been made explicit. You fight about your partner not texting you during the day, but the real conflict is between your rule that partners maintain constant communication and their rule that partners respect each other's focus time. You fight about how they talk to you during arguments, but the real conflict is between your rule that partners stay calm and their rule that partners express emotions honestly, even when intense. The rulebook covers everything, though most of it stays buried until violated. Communication frequency is heavily regulated by invisible rules. Some people carry the rule that partners text throughout the day, responding within minutes unless something prevents it. Others carry the rule that partners check in periodically, but don't need constant contact. Some people expect daily phone calls. Others find daily calls suffocating. Some people need to process their day out loud with their partner every evening. Others need silence after work to decompress alone. None of these rules are right or wrong, but they're completely incompatible with each other. If you need constant communication and your partner needs space to focus, someone's rule will be violated constantly. If you think partners should share everything immediately and your partner thinks partners should process internally before sharing. You'll perceive them as closed off, while they perceive you as intrusive. Displays of affection operate under equally rigid, but invisible rules. Some rulebooks say partners should kiss hello and goodbye every single time, touch frequently throughout the day, hold hands in public, and initiate physical contact constantly. Other rulebooks say partners show affection when they feel moved to, not as a requirement. Some people's rules demand verbal expressions of love daily. Others think saying it too often makes it meaningless. Some expect public declarations of the relationship on social media. Others think private relationships stay private. When your partner violates your affection rules, you don't think, "We have different preferences about physical touch frequency." You think they're not affectionate enough. They're taking you for granted. They don't really love you. Something is wrong. When you violate their rules by demanding more affection than feels natural to them, they don't think, "We have different comfort levels with physical expression." They think you're needy, clingy, demanding too much. Conflict resolution rules create some of the most intense clashes because they govern behavior during the moments when you're already upset. Your rulebook might say that partners stay and talk through disagreements until they're resolved, no matter how long it takes. Their rulebook might say that partners take space when emotions run too high and return to the conversation when calmer. Your rule feels like commitment and care. Their rule feels like emotional safety and respect. When they try to leave an argument to cool down, and you interpret it as abandonment or stonewalling, you're enforcing your rule that real partners don't walk away. When you keep pushing to resolve things immediately, and they feel cornered and overwhelmed, they're experiencing your violation of their rule that partners don't force conversations. Neither rule is objectively better, but they cannot coexist peacefully without negotiation. Your rules about conflict probably also specify how partners should argue. Maybe your rule says partners never raise their voices, never curse, never bring up past issues, never say hurtful things no matter how angry they are. Maybe their rule says partners express genuine emotions, even when messy, better honest intensity than fake calm. Maybe your rule says partners apologize immediately and move on. Maybe their rule says partners need time to process before apologizing meaningfully. Personal space rules govern how much time partners spend together versus apart, and violations here feel particularly threatening. Some rulebooks say partners want to spend most of their free time together, and choosing to do things separately means something is wrong. Other rulebooks say partners maintain robust, independent lives, and too much togetherness creates unhealthy enmeshment. Some rules dictate that partners always invite each other to social events. Others say partners can absolutely have friend time without their significant other present. Your rule might say partners share everything: passwords, phone access, location, all information about their day. Their rule might say partners respect each other's privacy and don't need to monitor or know everything. Your rule might say partners should want to be together constantly, especially early in the relationship. Their rule might say partners maintain independence regardless of relationship stage. These aren't just different preferences, they're fundamentally different philosophies about what healthy partnership looks like. Social obligations trigger rule conflicts constantly. Your rule might say that partners attend all family events together, no exceptions. Their rule might say partners support each other, but don't drag each other to every obligation. Your rule might say partners merge friend groups and do everything socially as a unit. Their rule might say partners maintain separate friendships and don't need to be included in everything. Your rule might say declining an invitation requires mutual agreement. Their rule says each person decides their own social calendar. When they skip your cousin's birthday party, you're not just disappointed, you're registering a rule violation. Your rulebook says partners show up for family, and their absence means they don't care about you or your family. Their rulebook says partners aren't obligated to attend every extended family event, and attending would be doing something they don't want to do out of obligation rather than genuine care. The incompatibility isn't about one party, It's about completely different definitions of what partnership requires. Daily routines hide countless rules you don't know you're enforcing. Maybe your rule says partners eat meals together whenever possible. Maybe their rule says partners eat when hungry, regardless of timing. Maybe your rule says partners go to bed and wake up together. Maybe their rule says partners respect different sleep schedules. Maybe your rule says partners spend Sunday mornings in bed together. Maybe their rule says partners use weekend mornings for exercise or solitude or productivity. These routine rules feel especially non-negotiable because they're about everyday life, not special occasions. You're not asking for anything big or dramatic, just that your partner eat dinner with you. Come to bed when you do. Spend Sunday morning how you've always spent it. But your partner experiences these small expectations as constant pressure to conform to a schedule or rhythm that doesn't match their needs or preferences. They're not rejecting you, they're rejecting your unspoken rule that partners synchronize their daily patterns. The method for identifying which rules you're enforcing starts with noticing when you feel that particular flavor of wrongness, not hurt because your partner was intentionally unkind, but hurt because they did something that just shouldn't happen between partners. The feeling is different from regular disappointment. It carries a sense of transgression, like they broke an agreement, even though no agreement was ever made explicit. When you catch that feeling, the rule underneath needs to be identified and examined. You felt wrong when your partner didn't text you during their workday. What's the rule? Partners maintain consistent communication even during work hours. You felt wrong when they went out with friends instead of staying home with you on Friday night. What's the rule? Partners prioritize time together over time with friends unless there's a special reason. You felt wrong when they didn't remember the name of your coworker you mentioned last week. What's the rule? Partners pay attention to and remember details about each other's lives. Each rule, once identified, needs to be evaluated. Does this rule serve you and your relationship, or does it create unnecessary conflict? Is this rule actually about your needs, or is it about maintaining a relationship image you absorbed from somewhere else? Is this rule reasonable to expect another adult to follow, or is it controlling their behavior in ways they never agreed to? Some rules will survive examination and should be kept. Partners don't lie to each other is probably a good rule. Partners don't intentionally hurt each other during arguments is reasonable. Partners follow through on commitments they make sense. These aren't arbitrary standards, they're basic requirements for functional partnership. Other rules won't survive examination and need to be discarded. Partners should always want to spend time together, probably needs to go. Partners should know what I need without me saying it, definitely needs to go. Partners should have the same communication style and preferences I do, needs to go. Partners should naturally do things the way I would do them, needs to go. These rules demand that your partner be someone they're not or possess abilities humans don't have. Many rules fall into a middle category where they reflect legitimate preferences that need to be negotiated rather than assumed. Partners should check in during the day might become, I'd like us to touch base once during work days when possible, but I understand some days that won't work. Partners should resolve conflicts before bed might become, I prefer not to go to sleep angry, but I understand if you need space to cool down, and we can agree to return to the conversation the next day. The distinction between rules you enforce and preferences you negotiate changes everything. Rules are non-negotiable demands that violations trigger hurt and anger. Preferences are desires you can express and discuss without requiring the other person to comply. When you treat a preference like a rule, you're essentially issuing an ultimatum about something that should be open for discussion. Creating explicit agreements, rather than assuming shared understanding, requires actually talking about the rules you've both been following unconsciously. This conversation feels awkward because it makes visible what's supposed to stay invisible. Successful relationships aren't supposed to need rulebooks, things should just flow naturally. But things don't flow naturally when you're following different rulebooks, and making them explicit is how you figure out where you actually agree and where you need to negotiate. The conversation might start with a specific conflict that keeps recurring. If you fight regularly about how much time you spend together versus apart, that's a sign you have incompatible rules about togetherness. Instead of continuing to fight about whether they should have come to that thing or stayed home this night, you can surface the actual rules. Your rule is partners spend most discretionary time together. Their rule is partners maintain robust, independent lives. Now you have something to actually negotiate. Negotiation means neither person's rule automatically wins. You can't just say, "My rule is right and yours is wrong, so you need to follow mine." They're both just rules, and you need to find a third option that works for both of you. Maybe the agreement becomes, you spend 3 evenings a week together doing something intentional, 2 evenings each doing your own thing, and weekends are flexible based on what's happening. This satisfies neither person's original rule perfectly, but it creates a shared agreement both people helped create. Some rules will be incompatible in ways that can't be negotiated. If your rule is partners live together, and their rule is partners maintain separate residences, you have a fundamental incompatibility. If your rule is partners have children, and their rule is partners remain child-free, you cannot compromise. If your rule is partners practice monogamy, and their rule is partners have open relationships, no middle ground exists. These aren't preferences to negotiate, they're deal breakers that determine compatibility. But most rules aren't deal breakers, they're just unconscious preferences that need to become conscious agreements. Your rule about communication frequency probably isn't a fundamental incompatibility. Your rule about how much physical affection partners exchange probably isn't a fundamental incompatibility. Your rule about whether partners attend every family event probably isn't a fundamental incompatibility. These are all areas where you can create agreements that differ from your original rules, but work better than the constant conflict of incompatible, invisible expectations. The process of making rules explicit will reveal some uncomfortable truths. You'll discover you've been rigidly enforcing rules about things you didn't realize you cared about. You'll discover your partner has been silently resenting your violations of their rules. You'll discover that many conflicts you attributed to your partner's personality or your relationship's dysfunction were actually just rule conflicts that could have been resolved years ago if you'd made them visible. You'll also discover which of your rules are genuinely about your needs versus which are about control or maintaining a specific relationship image. Rules that come from need sound like, "I need us to discuss major financial decisions together before making them." Rules that come from control sound like, "Partners should always agree on how money is spent." Rules that come from need sound like, "I need some physical affection daily to feel connected." Rules that come from image sound like, "Partners should display affection constantly to prove their relationship is strong." Your partner's rules will surprise you. Things you thought were just normal relationship behavior are rules they're enforcing that you never agreed to follow. Things you thought didn't matter to them turn out to be rules they care about deeply. Seeing their rulebook helps you understand why they've been hurt or frustrated by things that seemed insignificant to you. What registered as them being overly sensitive or demanding was them experiencing you breaking rules that felt obvious to them. The modification process for rules that don't serve you requires actually changing your automatic response when they're violated. You've spent years feeling hurt or angry when your partner doesn't check in during the day. You've identified that rule, evaluated it, and decided to modify it to, "We check in when convenient, but don't require constant contact." The rule change doesn't immediately change your emotional response. The next time your partner doesn't text you during their workday, your automatic response will still fire. You'll still feel that something is wrong, that they should have contacted you, that their silence means something negative. The modification happens in what you do with that automatic response. Instead of acting on it, texting them with, "Why haven't you messaged me?" getting upset. Withdrawing, you catch it and remind yourself of your modified rule. You don't need constant contact. They're not violating anything. Your feeling is just old programming running. This reprogramming takes time because the neural pathways are deep. Every time you catch the automatic response and don't act on it, you weaken the old pattern slightly. Every time you remind yourself of your new agreement instead of your old rule, you strengthen the new pattern slightly. This is not instant or easy, but it's possible. Your brain can learn new rules to replace old ones if you practice consistently. Your partner goes through the same process with their rules. They automatically feel suffocated when you want too much togetherness, but they've agreed to specific times you'll prioritize being together. When you suggest spending Saturday together, and their automatic response is, "We spend too much time together already," they have to catch that response and check it against the actual agreement. You're not demanding all their time, you're suggesting the time you both agreed to prioritize. Their feeling is old programming, not current reality. The ongoing nature of rule examination matters because new rules emerge all the time. You move in together and discover rules about household management you didn't know you had. You change jobs and discover rules about how partners should respond to career stress. You have children and discover rules about parenting responsibilities and couple time. You age and discover rules about how often partners should have sex or how much independence is acceptable. Each life transition surfaces new rulebook sections neither of you knew existed. Creating a habit of making rules explicit prevents years of fighting about invisible standards. When something new happens or changes, you can proactively discuss what rules you're each bringing to it. You're moving in together. What are your rules about cleanliness, noise levels, alone time, having friends over, sharing belongings, dividing household tasks? You're having a baby. What are your rules about nighttime parenting, division of childcare labor, maintaining your relationship versus focusing on the baby, involvement of extended family? Some couples resist this process because it feels unromantic or transactional. Partners should just understand each other. Love should mean not needing to spell everything out. Creating explicit agreements feels like turning your relationship into a business arrangement rather than a romantic partnership. But implicit rules don't create romance, they create resentment. Assuming your partner should just know what you need doesn't create understanding, it creates constant disappointment. The romance is in choosing each other despite different rulebooks. The romance is in being willing to negotiate agreements that work for both of you instead of insisting your partner follow your rules. The romance is in caring enough about each other's experience to make invisible expectations visible, so you can actually meet them. Nothing is romantic about punishing your partner for breaking rules they never knew existed. Different approaches exist for whether you surface all rules preemptively or just address them when conflicts arise. Some couples benefit from sitting down early in the relationship and going through major categories: communication, affection, conflict, personal space, social life, household responsibilities, and making their rules explicit before problems develop. Others find this too overwhelming and prefer to address rules as they surface through actual conflicts. Neither approach is inherently better, but the second approach requires commitment to actually examining rules when conflicts happen instead of just fighting about the surface behavior. If you wait for conflicts to reveal rules, you need to be able to shift from "you're doing this wrong" to "we have different rules about this, and we need to negotiate" when those conflicts occur. Most people get stuck in the "you're doing this wrong" phase and never reach the different rules insight. The explicit agreement creation doesn't mean you never feel disappointed or frustrated when your partner does something you wish they wouldn't. You can have an agreement that you each spend some evenings independently, and still sometimes wish they'd chosen to spend that evening with you instead. The difference is between feeling disappointed because you wanted something different and feeling betrayed because they broke a rule. Disappointment is manageable. Betrayal destroys relationships. When you've agreed that they get to decide how they spend their own time, and they choose to spend an evening with friends, your disappointment is just disappointment. You miss them. You wish you were together. But they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't violate anything. Your wish for something different doesn't make their choice a transgression. This distinction keeps conflict from spiraling because there's nothing to fight about, just a feeling to feel and move through. Rules that remain unexamined will continue causing damage regardless of how much you love each other or how compatible you seem otherwise. Invisible expectations are relationship poison because they create constant opportunities for hurt and resentment that neither person understands or can prevent. Your partner cannot follow rules they don't know exist. You cannot stop enforcing rules you don't know you're enforcing. The relationship will stay stuck in this pattern until the rules become visible enough to address. Making your rulebook explicit isn't admitting defeat or acknowledging dysfunction. It's taking responsibility for creating a relationship based on shared agreements, rather than incompatible assumptions. Your rules aren't universal truth, and neither are your partner's rules. What actually matters is whether you can build a shared rulebook that works for both of you, not perfectly, not without compromise, but well enough that you're living in the same relationship instead of two different ones that happen to share the same space. Chapter 4. Replacing romantic scripts with real-life agreements. Your partner came home from work yesterday in a terrible mood, and you asked what was wrong. They said nothing and went to take a shower. You felt shut out, maybe hurt, definitely frustrated. The romantic script says partners share everything immediately, open up when asked, turn to each other for emotional support. Your partner just violated the script, and now you're wondering why they won't let you in. Here's what the script doesn't tell you. Emotional availability isn't a constant state. It's not something your partner either has or doesn't have. Sometimes people need to process internally before they can articulate what's bothering them. Sometimes the processing is the support, not the conversation. Sometimes nothing means, I'm not ready to talk yet, or this isn't about us, or I need to sit with this feeling before I make it into words. The script promised you a partner who always wants to share. But real humans need different things at different times. The gap between romantic scripts and reality creates most of your relationship friction. You're operating from fantasies about how partnership should work, fantasies absorbed from movies and novels and songs that prioritize drama and narrative arc over actual function. Those fantasies give you expectations that sound reasonable until you try to live them. Then they become sources of constant disappointment because real life doesn't follow a script, and real people can't perform roles they never auditioned for. Each major category of relationship life has its own romantic script that needs replacing with functional agreements. The script feels true because it's everywhere, repeated so often it seems like obviously correct information about how relationships work. But scripts are designed to entertain, not to help two imperfect humans build a life together. What works in a 90-minute movie creates dysfunction in a decades-long partnership. This script ignores how emotional processing actually works for most people. Some people need to talk through feelings as they happen. Others need time alone to understand what they're feeling before they can communicate about it. Some people want active support and advice. Others want presence without commentary. Some people recover from bad days through conversation. Others recover through physical activity, sleep, or distraction. None of these approaches is better or worse, they're just different operating systems. When you expect your partner to emotionally process the way you do, you're imposing your script on their actual needs. If you're someone who talks through feelings immediately, and your partner is someone who processes internally first, your script says they're shutting you out when they're actually just doing what works for their brain. If you're someone who wants solutions when upset and your partner is someone who offers empathy instead, Your script says they're not being helpful when they're actually trying to support you in their own language. The functional alternative to the emotional availability script requires distinguishing between availability and performing availability. Your partner can be available, meaning willing to support you when you genuinely need it without being required to perform availability according to your specific script. Availability means they show up for actual crises, listen when you need to process something important, and maintain genuine interest in your emotional life. It doesn't mean they must respond to every feeling you have in the exact way you prefer at the exact moment you prefer it. Creating agreements around emotional availability starts with each person articulating what they actually need versus what the script told them they should need. You might need to verbally process your day most evenings. That's legitimate. But your need doesn't automatically become your partner's obligation to sit and listen every single night regardless of their own capacity. The agreement might be, you process your day most evenings, and your partner engages when they have the bandwidth. But some nights they need silence, and that doesn't mean anything about their care for you. Your partner might need time alone to process difficult emotions before discussing them. That's legitimate. But their need doesn't mean you must wait indefinitely wondering what's wrong and whether it involves you. The agreement might be, when your partner is processing something and needs space, they tell you that's what's happening and approximately when they'll be ready to talk. You don't push for immediate disclosure, and they don't leave you hanging without information. The language for negotiating emotional availability focuses on preference and capacity, rather than obligation and failure. I prefer to talk through feelings as they happen, and I'd like to know if that works for you, or if you need processing time first opens negotiation. You should want to talk to me when you're upset closes it. I have limited capacity for processing conversations right now, but I care about what you're dealing with is honest. I'm always here for you sets up failure when capacity runs out. Household labor operates under a script that completely ignores the actual work required to maintain a home. The romantic script says household tasks just happen, barely worth mentioning, certainly not worth discussing in detail. Or it says partners naturally split tasks fairly based on preference and ability. Or it says whoever cares more about something being done should do it. The script definitely doesn't include the exhausting negotiation of who cleans toilets, who notices when you're out of toilet paper, who remembers to schedule maintenance appointments, or who carries the mental load of tracking what needs doing. The fair division fantasy is particularly destructive because fair means completely different things to different people. Your fair might mean splitting every task exactly 50-50. Their fair might mean each person doing tasks they're better at or care more about. Your fair might mean equal time spent on household work. Their fair might mean equal value of contribution, including their higher income that pays for services you don't have to do. The script says fair division happens naturally. Reality says you'll fight about dishes for 20 years if you don't create explicit agreements. Many people carry a script that says partners should just notice what needs doing and do it without being asked. This script creates rage on both sides: rage from the person who's constantly noticing and doing, rage from the person being accused of not caring when they genuinely don't see the problem. Noticing is a skill, not a moral quality. Some people were trained from childhood to track household needs. Others weren't. Neither makes someone a better or worse partner, but the mismatch creates dysfunction when you expect equal noticing. The functional alternative requires itemizing actual tasks, instead of assuming shared understanding of what keeping house entails. Cooking sounds like a single task until you break it into meal planning, grocery shopping, food prep, actual cooking, serving, cleanup, and tracking what ingredients you have versus need. Laundry sounds simple until you separate sorting, washing, drying, folding, putting away, keeping track of what needs special care. Each major category hides multiple subtasks, and assuming your partner sees the full scope when you haven't discussed it creates resentment. Creating household labor agreements means listing everything that needs doing, deciding together what level of completion matters for each task, and assigning responsibility in a way both people can live with. The agreement might not be equal task distribution. Maybe you do more household work, and they do more yard work. Or you handle daily maintenance, and they handle major projects. Or you do most tasks, and they contribute more financially to hire help. Equal doesn't mean identical. It means both people feel the arrangement is reasonable. The mental load component needs its own agreement because it's invisible until you name it. Mental load is tracking what needs doing, when it needs doing, how it should be done, what supplies are needed, and whether it got done. You can split tasks, but not mental load, which means someone is still carrying the full burden of household management, even when execution is shared. The agreement might be, each person owns the mental load for their assigned tasks completely, including noticing when tasks need doing and acquiring necessary supplies. The other person doesn't help, they're not responsible for that domain. Language for negotiating household labor avoids helping or pitching in, because that language assumes household work belongs to one person who occasionally gets assistance. Can you help with dinner? Implies dinner is your job, and they're doing you a favor. It's your night to handle dinner implies dinner is a shared responsibility with clear ownership rotation. The shift from helping to owning changes the entire dynamic. Financial decisions carry scripts about romance and trust that actively prevent functional money management. The script says partners who truly trust each other merge finances completely and make all decisions together. Or it says partners who are truly independent keep everything separate. Or it says whoever earns more has more say. Or it says talking about money is unromantic and mercenary. So partners should just handle finances with minimal discussion. Every version of the script creates problems, because money is too important and too emotionally loaded to operate on assumptions. The merged finances fantasy says combining everything proves your commitment and trust. Some couples thrive with fully merged money. They have similar financial values, compatible spending habits, and equal interest in tracking finances. But many couples merge money because the script says that's what partners do. Then discover they have completely incompatible approaches to spending, saving, and financial decision-making. Now they're fighting about money constantly because neither person can make financial choices without affecting the other. The complete separation fantasy says keeping finances entirely separate protects the relationship from money conflicts. This can work when both people earn similarly, have similar lifestyles, and split costs in ways that feel fair. But it often falls apart when incomes differ significantly, when someone takes time out of paid work for childcare or education, or when you're trying to build shared assets like a home. Splitting a restaurant bill 50-50 sounds fair, until one person earns twice what the other does, and they can't afford restaurants at the other person's frequency. Functional financial agreements start with each person articulating their money values and anxieties. You might value security and hate debt. They might value experiences and don't mind carrying some debt for things that matter. You might be anxious about having insufficient savings. They might be anxious about missing opportunities while money sits in accounts. Neither set of values is wrong, but they need acknowledgement before you can create agreements that work for both of you. The structure might be fully merged, fully separate, or hybrid depending on what actually serves your situation. Hybrid arrangements are common. Shared account for household expenses and savings goals. Individual accounts for personal spending. The percentages contributed to shared accounts might be equal, proportional to income, or something else you negotiate. What matters isn't the structure itself, but that both people understand and agree to it. Decision-making thresholds need explicit agreement. You probably don't need to consult each other about buying groceries. But what about buying a new computer? A car? Making a career change that affects income? The agreement might be, purchases under $500 from personal accounts don't require discussion. Everything over that, or from shared accounts, gets discussed first. Career changes that affect household income get discussed before making commitments. Large gifts to family members get discussed. The language for financial negotiation names feelings without making them rules. "I feel anxious when our savings drop below a certain level" is different from "we should always maintain this savings level." The first shares information your partner can work with. The second makes a demand. "I value experiences and worry we're prioritizing future security over present life" is different from "we save too much." Both statements might lead to the same conversation, but the tone determines whether it's a negotiation or a fight. Sexual intimacy lives under the most toxic scripts because everyone absorbed messages about what sex should be like in relationships. And those messages came from sources interested in selling fantasy, rather than describing reality. The script says partners should want sex with each other constantly and equally. The script says desire should be spontaneous, not something you schedule or actively create. The script says good sex means both people get aroused simultaneously, no negotiation required. Everything flows naturally from attraction. The script says if sex requires communication or effort, something is broken. Real sexual dynamics in long-term relationships bear almost no resemblance to this script. Most couples don't have matching desire levels. Many people experience responsive desire rather than spontaneous desire, meaning they don't randomly feel turned on, but can become aroused when sexual activity starts. Arousal patterns change with stress, hormones, life circumstances, relationship satisfaction, and 1,000 other factors. What worked in year 1 might not work in year 5. What feels good on vacation might feel like obligation when you're exhausted from work and parenting. The matching desire fantasy says both partners should want sex with similar frequency. And if they don't, someone is broken or the relationship is dying. This fantasy ignores that desire levels vary normally between individuals and across a single person's lifespan. The person who wants sex twice a week isn't more sexual or more in love than the person who wants it twice a month. They just have different baseline desire levels, and neither is the correct one. When you operate from the matching desire script, mismatched libido becomes a crisis. The higher desire partner feels rejected and unattractive. The lower desire partner feels pressured and defective. Both people think the problem is either fixable or a sign of fundamental incompatibility, when the actual problem is expecting desire to match. The script says partners should naturally want sex with the same frequency. Reality says desire matching is rare, and sustainable sex requires negotiating different needs. The spontaneous desire script says arousal should strike randomly and simultaneously, leading to effortless, passionate encounters. Some people do experience spontaneous desire, but many people, particularly women, and particularly in long-term relationships, experience responsive desire instead. Responsive desire means arousal builds through physical intimacy rather than preceding it. Someone with responsive desire might never randomly think, "I want sex right now," but they can become aroused and enjoy sex once it starts. When you expect spontaneous desire and your partner has responsive desire, you misread their experience constantly. They're not uninterested in sex, they're just not randomly turned on. They need a different pathway to arousal than you do. The script says this difference means something is wrong. Reality says it's a different operating system that works fine when you understand it. Functional alternatives to sexual scripts require conversation that most couples avoid because talking about sex feels uncomfortable or unromantic. The script says good sex doesn't require discussion. It just happens naturally from attraction and chemistry. But most couples who maintain satisfying sexual relationships over decades talk about sex regularly. They discuss what's working, what isn't, what they want to try, what they need to feel aroused, how they're feeling about their sexual dynamic. Creating sexual agreements starts with each person articulating their actual desire level and arousal pattern rather than what they think it should be. You might have spontaneous desire and prefer sex 3 times a week. They might have responsive desire and prefer sex once a week. The agreement isn't that both people compromise to sex twice a week that doesn't address the underlying desire type difference. The agreement might be: sex gets initiated with enough advance notice for the responsive desire partner to mentally transition. And refusals don't mean rejection of the person. The agreement might address how you handle desire differences. Maybe you agree that the higher desire partner can masturbate without it being a commentary on the relationship. Maybe you agree to certain sexual activities more frequently than others. Maybe you agree to regular check-ins about your sexual dynamic, rather than letting resentment build silently. Maybe you agree that initiating sex doesn't always mean you want your partner to reciprocate. Sometimes it's an offer they can accept or decline without explanation. Language for sexual negotiation requires vulnerability that the script says you shouldn't need. I feel most aroused when I've had time to relax first. So initiating right before bed usually doesn't work well for me. Gives your partner information they can use. You never want sex, blames them for a pattern you haven't actually discussed. I'd like to try scheduling sex to see if that helps me mentally prepare, acknowledges your needs. If we have to schedule sex, our relationship is dead, enforces a script that's killing your actual sex life. Personal time exists under competing scripts that are equally dysfunctional. One script says partners should want to spend all their free time together, and choosing independent activities means you're growing apart. Another script says partners should maintain completely independent lives, and too much togetherness indicates unhealthy codependence. Both scripts prevent functional negotiation of how much time together versus apart actually works for your specific relationship. The togetherness script treats any desire for separate activities as a relationship problem. Why would you want to do something without your partner if you love them? Why would they choose to spend time with friends instead of with you? The script frames independence as selfish or threatening, making it nearly impossible to say, "I need time alone," without your partner interpreting it as rejection. This script creates relationships where people are physically together, but resentful about not having space. The independence script treats too much togetherness as a warning sign of losing yourself. Partners should maintain robust separate lives to stay interesting to each other. This script can work well for couples who both want significant independence, but it creates disconnection when one person needs more togetherness than the script allows. You end up feeling guilty for wanting your partner's company, like you're being needy by hoping they'll spend Saturday with you instead of pursuing their own activities. Neither script asks what actually works for both people. You might need several hours alone daily to feel okay. They might need that much togetherness. You might recharge through solitude. They might recharge through connection. You might maintain friendships through regular solo activities. They might maintain friendships primarily through couple socializing. None of these preferences indicate relationship health or dysfunction. They're just different needs that require acknowledgement and negotiation. Functional personal time agreements specify how much time together versus apart both people need, and how you'll handle the inevitable difference between your needs. The agreement might be weeknights are flexible based on what each person needs, but you prioritize time together at least 3 evenings per week. Weekend mornings you do your own thing, afternoons you coordinate. When either person needs solo time, they say so directly rather than creating distance through mood or withdrawal. The agreement addresses not just quantity but quality. Maybe you need actual alone time, not just physically separate activities in the same space. Maybe they need meaningful together time, not just being in the same room while both scrolling phones. Maybe you need advance notice before social obligations. Maybe they need spontaneity. The specific terms matter less than both people understanding and agreeing to them. Language for personal time negotiation avoids making someone wrong for their needs. I need several hours alone this weekend to recharge states your need. You're always running off to do your own thing, makes them defensive. I'd like us to plan something together for Saturday, makes a request. You never want to spend time with me, starts a fight you won't resolve. Social life expectations carry scripts about couple behavior that range from partners do everything together to partners maintain completely independent social lives with every variation in between. The Together script says couples attend all social events as a unit, merge friend groups, and rarely do anything socially without each other. The separate script says partners maintain their own friendships and social calendars without requiring the other person's participation. Most relationships fall somewhere in the middle. But without discussion, you're both operating from different assumptions. The merged social life script treats separate socializing as suspicious or threatening. Why would you want to have dinner with friends without bringing your partner? Why would they want to attend an event solo when you're available? The script frames social independence as either preparation for cheating or evidence of relationship problems. This creates dynamics where people feel obligated to include their partner in everything or guilty when they don't. The completely separate script says partners should maintain independent friendships and social calendars, meeting up afterward to share about their separate experiences. This works beautifully for couples who both want significant social independence, but it creates problems when one person needs more shared social life. You want to build friendships as a couple and share social experiences. They interpret your desire to be included as clinginess or insecurity. Neither script addresses what actually makes sense for your relationship and your specific social needs. You might have close friends you see regularly without your partner, and that's healthy. You might also want your partner to know these friends and occasionally join you. They might have work friends you'll never meet, and that's fine. They might also have childhood friends they want you to know. You might both enjoy hosting friends as a couple sometimes and seeing them separately other times. Functional social life agreements specify which events or relationships are solo versus together territory. The agreement might be: immediate family events include both partners, unless there's a compelling reason otherwise. Extended family events are optional. Work social events are attended solo, unless explicitly a +1 situation. Friend gatherings are flexible, sometimes together, sometimes solo, depending on the specific situation and what both people prefer. The agreement addresses how you handle invitations and scheduling. Maybe you each manage your own social calendar and just keep each other informed. Maybe you check with each other before committing to weekend plans. Maybe certain nights are protected for couple time and others are available for solo socializing. Maybe you agree to X number of social activities together monthly, and the rest is flexible. Language for social negotiation respects both people's preferences without making either wrong. I'd prefer to see this friend alone because we have history. I want to catch up on privately is different from you can't come because you wouldn't fit in. The first is honest. The second is cruel. I'd like you to come to this event with me because meeting my work colleagues is important to me is different from you have to come because partners always attend these things together. The first makes a request with reasoning. The second enforces a script. Every category of relationship life benefits from replacing scripts with agreements. But the process isn't linear or one time. You create an agreement about household labor. Then one person changes jobs and the agreement stops working. You negotiate sexual frequency. Then someone starts medication that affects their libido, and you need to renegotiate. You agree on personal time boundaries. Then you have a child and all previous agreements become irrelevant. The skill isn't creating perfect agreements that last forever. The skill is being willing to keep examining what's working versus what's not and adjusting agreements accordingly. Scripts pretend relationship dynamics are static once you figure out how things should work. They stay that way. Reality is that both people keep changing, circumstances keep changing, and agreements need to evolve with those changes. Making this shift from scripts to agreements feels awkward, because you're making explicit what's supposed to remain implicit. Partners should just know how to be together. Love should mean not needing to negotiate. But scripts are precisely why you don't just know you're both following different instructions absorbed from different sources, assuming your version is universal truth. The negotiation isn't evidence of dysfunction. It's evidence that you're willing to build something real instead of performing something scripted. Your partner won't perfectly match the romantic vision you absorbed any more than you'll perfectly match theirs. You can keep fighting about the gap between reality and script, Or you can build agreements based on who you both actually are and what actually works for your specific combination of needs, preferences, and circumstances. The second option requires more communication, more negotiation, and more willingness to abandon fantasies. It also creates relationships that function instead of relationships that look like they should function, while slowly suffocating both people under the weight of impossible expectations. Chapter 5. Building your new expectation system. You've identified where your expectations came from, separated what's yours from what's your partner's responsibility, made your invisible rules visible, and replaced romantic scripts with functional agreements. Now you're sitting across from your partner feeling uncomfortable because they just did something that triggers your old programming, and you have to decide. Do you react from the script you've been dismantling, or do you respond from the new system you're trying to build? The gap between understanding expectations and actually changing them is where most people get stuck. You know intellectually that your partner doesn't need to text you constantly to prove they care. You've identified that expectation as inherited programming from your anxiously attached first relationship. You've even discussed it and agreed on different communication norms. But when 3 hours pass without a message, your nervous system still fires the same alarm it always has. And suddenly you're upset and crafting a passive-aggressive text before you even notice what you're doing. This is the implementation problem. Insight doesn't automatically change behavior. Understanding where your expectations came from doesn't make them stop operating. You can't think your way out of patterns that live in your body and fire automatically when triggered. The work of actually building a new expectation system requires different tools than the work of analyzing the old one. Most people approach expectation change like they'd approach learning information, read about it, understand it, apply it. But expectations aren't information. They're deeply grooved neural pathways formed through years of repetition and emotional reinforcement. Changing them requires the same thing that created them: repetition and emotional experience. You need new grooves, and grooves form slowly through consistent practice, not through sudden insight. The practice starts with catching yourself in the moment when old expectations fire. This sounds simple, but requires attention most people don't think to deploy. Your automatic response happens so fast and feels so justified that you act on it without ever noticing you had a choice. Your partner comes home and doesn't kiss you hello because they immediately went to the bathroom, and you're already feeling hurt and withdrawn before you register what happened. Catching the automatic response means creating space between the trigger and your reaction. The trigger happens: your partner doesn't text, doesn't greet you, forgets something, does something differently than you do it, makes a choice you wouldn't make. The old expectation fires, producing a feeling: hurt, anger, anxiety, disappointment, resentment. Your usual pattern is to act on that feeling immediately. Withdraw, criticize, demand explanation, punish through mood or distance. The practice is to pause between feeling and action. You feel the hurt. You notice it. You identify it. There's the old expectation firing. My partner didn't text during their workday, and my nervous system is interpreting that as evidence they don't care. You've created a gap, however small, between stimulus and response. In that gap, choice becomes possible. The choice isn't whether to feel the feeling, you're already feeling it, and you can't think your way out of an emotional response. The choice is what you do with the feeling. Your old pattern might be to text them, guess you're too busy to even check in, or to be cold when they get home, or to start a fight about how they never prioritize you. Your new pattern, the one you're trying to build, is to recognize the feeling as old programming and let it pass without feeding it. Letting feelings pass without acting on them goes against most contemporary advice about honoring your feelings and communicating your needs. But not every feeling reflects current reality, and not every feeling requires action. When your feeling is based on an expectation you've identified as dysfunctional and are actively trying to change, acting on it just reinforces the old pathway. You feel hurt that your partner didn't text. You act hurt. Your partner responds to your hurt, and your brain logs. Partner not texting equals legitimate threat. response confirmed. Breaking that pattern means feeling the hurt without acting on it. You notice, I'm having that feeling again. The one that says my partner's lack of communication means they don't care. I know intellectually that's not true. We agreed they don't need to check in during focused work time. This feeling is just old wiring, not current reality. You sit with the discomfort of the feeling without trying to make it go away, and without making it your partner's problem. This gets easier with practice, but never becomes effortless. Each time you successfully catch the old pattern and choose differently, you weaken the old pathway slightly and strengthen the new one slightly. Each time you act on the old pattern, you reinforce it. Change happens slowly through accumulated choices, not through dramatic overnight transformation. The method for regular expectation check-ins prevents new unconscious patterns from forming while you're busy dealing with old ones. Expectations don't stop appearing just because you've started examining them. New situations create new expectations. Changes in circumstances reveal expectations you didn't know you had. What worked 6 months ago stops working, and you need to recalibrate. Check-ins work best when scheduled rather than done only when problems arise. Monthly or quarterly works for most couples, though you might need more frequent check-ins during major life transitions. The check-in isn't a relationship review or a time to air grievances. It's specifically focused on expectations. What expectations do we currently have of each other? Which ones are working, which aren't, and what needs adjusting? The structure keeps the conversation productive rather than letting it devolve into blame. You each come prepared with observations about patterns you've noticed. Maybe you've noticed resentment building about household task distribution. Maybe they've noticed you seem disappointed when they make plans without checking with you first. Maybe you've both noticed your sex life has shifted, and you're not sure if that's okay or needs discussion. You share observations without accusation. I've noticed I feel resentful about doing most of the cooking lately is different from you never help with dinner. The first is data about your internal experience. The second is an attack. I've noticed you seem hurt when I make weekend plans with friends is different from you're too clingy about my time. Observations describe patterns. Accusations assign blame. Each observation gets examined for the expectation underneath. Your resentment about cooking reveals an expectation that cooking would be shared equally, or at least acknowledged. Their hurt about weekend plans reveals an expectation that you'd coordinate schedules before committing to activities. You're not arguing about who's right, you're identifying mismatched or unstated expectations that need addressing. Some expectations surface that you didn't know you had until circumstances changed. You both work from home now, and you're discovering you expected more separation between work and personal life than your current situation allows. You had a baby, and you're discovering wildly different expectations about parenting responsibilities, sleep schedules, and how to maintain your relationship while caring for an infant. You changed jobs, and expectations about career priority and household responsibility need recalibrating. The check-in creates space to name these newly discovered expectations and decide what to do with them. Some will require negotiation. Some will require one or both of you to adjust. Some will reveal genuine incompatibility that you need to decide how to handle. The point isn't to eliminate all expectation mismatches, that's impossible. The point is to make them visible before they become chronic sources of resentment. Recalibrating when expectations aren't being met requires distinguishing between expectations that need adjusting versus situations where your partner genuinely isn't meeting reasonable needs. This distinction is crucial because not all expectations are created equal. Some expectations are dysfunctional remnants of romantic scripts and need to be dropped. Others are legitimate needs that deserve to be met, and if they're consistently not being met, you have a real problem. The question to ask when an expectation isn't being met: is this expectation based on what I genuinely need to feel safe, respected, and valued in this relationship? Or is it based on scripts, comparison, or trying to make my partner be someone they're not? Genuine needs sound like, I need honesty in our communication. I need my partner to follow through on commitments they make. I need basic respect even during disagreements. I need my partner to contribute fairly to our household and financial responsibilities. Script-based expectations sound like, I need my partner to text me throughout the day. I need them to always want to spend time with me. I need them to know what I need without me asking. I need them to express love the specific way I think they should. I need them to be as interested in my hobbies as I am. I need them to react to my feelings exactly how I want them to react. The difference is between needs that any healthy adult should be able to meet versus needs that require your partner to be someone they're not, or to have abilities humans don't possess. If your expectation is basic respect and your partner is consistently disrespectful, that's not an expectation problem, that's a relationship problem. If your expectation is mind reading and your partner can't read your mind, that's an expectation problem. When you've identified a legitimate need that isn't being met, the conversation shifts from, I need to adjust my expectations to, I need to communicate clearly what I need and see if my partner is willing and able to meet it. You're not asking them to be different than they are. You're asking them to treat you in ways that basic partnership requires. The language focuses on specific behaviors rather than character judgments. I need you to let me know if you're going to be significantly late coming home is specific and reasonable. You're so inconsiderate is a character attack. I need us to have a conversation about our financial situation before making major purchases is specific and reasonable. You're terrible with money attacks their character. I need you to follow through when you say you'll do something is specific and reasonable. You're so unreliable makes them defensive. Your partner's response to clearly stated reasonable needs tells you important information. If they hear your need, acknowledge it, and make genuine efforts to meet it, you're working together. If they dismiss your need, become defensive, or agree, but never actually change behavior, you're facing either unwillingness or inability, and both are problems that need direct acknowledgement. Unwillingness means your partner understands what you need, but doesn't think they should have to meet it. They might think your need is unreasonable, or they might simply not care enough to adjust their behavior. Inability means your partner wants to meet your need, but lacks the capacity or skill to do so consistently. Maybe your need requires them to remember things, and their memory genuinely doesn't work that way. Maybe your need requires emotional availability they don't have. Both unwillingness and inability create the same result: your legitimate need goes unmet, but they require different responses. Unwillingness might be negotiable if you can help your partner understand why the need matters and what meeting it would look like. Inability might be solvable through workarounds or external support. Or both might indicate fundamental incompatibility that no amount of expectation adjustment will fix. The distinction between adjustable expectations and actual incompatibility is where people most often lie to themselves. You want the relationship to work, so you keep adjusting your expectations downward, telling yourself you're being more realistic when you're actually abandoning legitimate needs. Or you refuse to adjust any expectations because that feels like settling, when many of your expectations are dysfunctional, and changing them would improve your relationship. Actual incompatibility exists when your fundamental needs conflict with your partner's fundamental needs or nature in ways that can't be negotiated. You need children, and they need to remain child-free. You need monogamy, and they need open relationship structure. You need to live in a city, and they need rural space. You need high emotional expressiveness, and they need emotional reserve. You need partnership with someone who shares your faith, and they need freedom from religious practice. These aren't expectation problems you can solve by being more realistic. They're genuine incompatibilities where someone would have to fundamentally compromise their own needs to stay in the relationship. Adjusting expectations works for, I expected my partner to text me constantly, and I can adjust to less frequent contact. It doesn't work for, I need to build a life with someone who wants children, and my partner doesn't want children. Most relationship problems fall between clear incompatibility and simple expectation adjustment. Your needs aren't fundamentally incompatible, but you're also not just dealing with unrealistic romantic scripts. You're dealing with two real people who have different operating systems, different learned patterns, and different capacities trying to build a functional life together. This middle territory is where most of the work happens. The protocol for introducing new expectations prevents you from unconsciously adding requirements to your relationship without discussion. You've been doing expectation work, making things explicit, creating agreements. Then your friend tells you about how their partner plans monthly surprise dates, and suddenly you have a new expectation that your partner should do this too. Or you read something about couples who do weekly relationship check-ins, and now you expect that. Or you see something on social media, and a new standard appears. New expectations need the same examination old ones got. Where is this coming from? Is it based on what would actually serve our relationship? Or is it based on comparison and script? Do I actually want this? Or do I just think I should want it? If I do want it, is it something I can request and negotiate? Or am I just adding a requirement without discussion? Introducing new expectations requires making them explicit offers, rather than sudden demands. I've been thinking it would be nice if we did a weekly check-in about how we're both feeling about the relationship. Maybe Sunday evenings over tea. Would that feel valuable to you, or would it feel like an obligation? This opens conversation. We should be doing weekly check-ins like other couples do creates pressure and comparison. Your partner might embrace the new expectation, might want to modify it, or might not want it at all. Their response is information, not rejection. Maybe they like the check-in idea, but Sunday evenings don't work because they're exhausted by then. Maybe they're open to monthly check-ins, but weekly feels excessive. Maybe they think check-ins would feel forced and prefer more organic communication. All of these responses are valid starting points for negotiation. Retiring outdated expectations requires acknowledging when things you once needed no longer serve you. Early in your relationship, you might have needed frequent reassurance about your partner's feelings. You've built more security over time, and you don't need that anymore. The expectation can be retired. You might have needed very clear boundaries about personal time when you first moved in together. You've found your rhythm, and you can relax that structure. You might have needed detailed communication about schedules when coordinating was new. You've developed enough shared understanding that you can operate with less explicit coordination. Expectations that made sense during one phase of your relationship might actively harm later phases. The new relationship expectation that you spend all your free time together becomes suffocating 5 years in. The early parenting expectation that you check about every decision becomes infantilizing when the kids are older. The expectation that you process every difficult emotion together becomes unnecessary when you've each developed better self-regulation skills. Retiring an expectation means consciously releasing it, not just letting it fade. I realized I don't actually need you to check in about your evening plans anymore. I trust you to manage your own schedule, and I'll tell you if I need coordination for something specific. This creates clarity. Silently dropping an expectation and getting upset when your partner still follows the old agreement creates confusion. Maintaining alignment as both people evolve is the ongoing practice that determines whether your expectation system stays functional or calcifies into new dysfunction. People change. What you needed at 25 isn't what you need at 45. What worked when you were building careers doesn't work when you're managing health issues. What made sense before children doesn't make sense after. What felt right in your hometown doesn't feel right after you've moved across the country. Each person's evolution requires expectation evolution. You develop new interests, and expectations about how you spend time need adjusting. Your partner's career shifts, and expectations about availability need recalibrating. You both age, and expectations about physical intimacy, energy levels, and life priorities need updating. Health changes, family situations change, financial circumstances change. Every change potentially affects what you expect from each other, and what you can reasonably provide. The couples who stay aligned through decades of change are the ones who keep talking about what they need instead of assuming agreements made years ago still apply. They check in regularly about whether their current arrangement still works. They're willing to renegotiate when it doesn't. They treat their relationship as a living system that requires maintenance rather than a static structure that should just keep functioning without attention. Language for maintaining alignment focuses on evolution rather than failure. I've noticed my needs around personal time are shifting as I get older. I need more solitude than I used to, describes change. You're suddenly so distant assigns blame for normal evolution. My relationship with work is changing, and I want to talk about how that might affect our household agreements. Opens discussion. You're not pulling your weight anymore, shuts it down. Your partner's evolution might not align with yours, and that creates tension even in healthy relationships. You're becoming more introverted as you age, while they're becoming more extroverted. You're more focused on health and wellness, while they're less interested. You're more politically engaged, while they're tuning out news. These divergences aren't necessarily problems, but they require acknowledgement and negotiation about how you'll handle increasing difference. Some divergences are manageable. You pursue your interests separately while maintaining connection in other areas. Some divergences require conscious bridging. You make effort to engage with things that matter to your partner, even when they don't naturally interest you. Some divergences reveal growing incompatibility. You're moving in such different directions that staying connected becomes forced rather than natural. The framework for making conscious expectations an ongoing practice, rather than a one-time fix, requires building it into your relationship rhythm. Expectation work isn't something you do once and complete. It's a continuous process of attention, adjustment, and realignment. The skill you're developing is the ability to notice when expectations are operating, examine whether they serve you, communicate about them clearly, and negotiate functional alternatives. Weekly practice looks like noticing moments when you feel that characteristic expectation violation feeling and pausing to examine what expectation fired rather than just acting on the feeling. Monthly practice looks like checking in about how your agreements are working and what needs adjusting. Yearly practice looks like bigger conversations about how you're both changing and whether your relationship structure still fits who you're becoming. The practice never becomes automatic because expectations keep forming. Your brain is designed to create patterns and predictions about how things should work. Every experience you have feeds into your expectation-generating system. You can't turn that off. You can only keep making the process conscious rather than unconscious. Some people resist the ongoing nature of this work because it seems exhausting. Relationships should be easier. You shouldn't have to constantly monitor and adjust expectations. But the alternative, unconscious expectations creating constant friction, is far more exhausting than conscious expectation management. The exhaustion you feel fighting about dishes and schedule and intimacy and 1,000 other surface issues is expectation conflict dressed up as everyday disagreement. Making expectations conscious doesn't create more work. It reveals work you were already doing ineffectively and gives you better tools. You were already fighting about whether your partner should have texted you. Now you're having a different conversation about what you actually need for security and what your partner can reasonably provide. You were already resentful about household labor distribution. Now you're negotiating explicit agreements instead of seething about invisible ones. The difference between relationships that sustain and relationships that slowly strangle is this ongoing willingness to examine what you're asking of each other. The couples who stay functional over decades aren't the ones who got lucky and naturally compatible. They're the ones who kept checking their expectations against reality, kept adjusting what wasn't working, and kept choosing to build agreements based on who they actually are rather than who they think they should be. Your relationship won't ever reach a state where expectation work is finished. You'll keep discovering new expectations you didn't know you had. Life will keep changing in ways that make old agreements obsolete. You'll both keep evolving in directions you can't predict. The question isn't whether you'll need to keep doing this work. You will. The question is whether you'll do it consciously and together, or unconsciously and in conflict. Building a new expectation system means committing to this ongoing practice even when it feels tedious or uncomfortable. It means choosing to examine your assumptions rather than acting on them automatically. It means being willing to drop expectations that don't serve you, even when they feel obviously true. It means negotiating with your partner instead of demanding they meet standards they never agreed to follow. It means accepting that real partnership looks nothing like the scripts you absorbed, but can be far more satisfying when you build it consciously instead of inheriting it accidentally. The work you've done through this book only matters if you keep doing it. Understanding where expectations come from means nothing if you keep acting on them unconsciously. Knowing the difference between your responsibilities and your partner's means nothing if you keep outsourcing what's yours. Identifying your invisible rules means nothing if you keep enforcing them without discussion. Recognizing romantic scripts means nothing if you keep measuring your relationship against them. All of that understanding becomes useful only when you build actual practices around it. Practices you maintain not because they're easy, but because your relationship depends on it.